Welcome to the How Did That Work Out podcast, where we share, explore, as well as inspect internally and externally a variety of our life situations as well as others, all for the purpose of answering how did that work out. I'm your host, Graham.
And I'm your host, Mike J.
Here we go.
All right. Well, welcome to a new episode of How Did That Work Out? And it's just me, Mike J, and Graham just chatting on a Saturday morning, enjoying our coffee. Did you get a fresh brew? You got a fresh brew?
Yeah, man, I got some of that So I usually drink like a half calf because coffee's so ritual to me. I really don't need the vibrating, elevating off the chair, highly caffeinated effect. You know, I'll drink. These are good American-sized coffee cups. I'll drink like 4 of those a day, and so I usually do a half calf blend where I'll do like 3 scoops of regular and then a couple scoops of decaf. And today's blend is really good. It's that Farah coffee. I don't know if you're familiar. It's really good. And then the decaf is that Cafe Bustelo, that Cuban coffee Bustelo that we like so much.
Yeah.
And they've got a decaf blend, and it's got that like chocolatey aroma to it. Oof.
Right.
So good.
Yes. Nice. Yeah, I mean, I like the Bustelo. I get the packets every now and then, and we'll add that to a regular coffee. Just to kind of give it that, like you said, that chocolatey essence to it. But other than that, I don't really drink hipster coffee. I just, the Keurig with my wife calls this my hillbilly cup.
I like it, man.
Because, it's a tin cup.
Yeah.
See, it's got the camping handles on it, so it folds up real compact.
Yeah.
And I like it mostly because, number one, I'm a fan of the industrial look. And so this kind of gives it that with the metal, but it also has a flat bottom. And so that works really well with my coffee warmer on my desk. And so it keeps the coffee, obviously warm until the very end. So
yeah,
most cups, if it's got like a concave underneath it, it's not going to work as well. So I figure, and then stainless steel, it doesn't stain, obviously, and it also conducts heat better. So, when we were without power, my coffee went cold during the snowstorm, and you can't just throw this in the microwave to warm it up.
Right.
So I put it on the stove, and I put it on for maybe like 30 seconds. And usually you can, when you make coffee fresh, you can usually grab the metal handle and it's fine.
Yeah.
But I put it on for only 30 seconds, and the handle was too hot to touch.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, okay, coffee's hot.
Yeah. That's one of the worst sort of exposures to heat for me is on the palm, like right in the middle of the palm where you grab things. But yeah, that looks like the kind of the open fire cup where once you're done with your coffee, you can dump a can of beans in it and put it on the warmer.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is a camping cup, and it actually can hold a water bottle. So, like in the Army, we have these, but they're shaped like the outside of a canteen. So it's kind of like a kidney shape, right? And then the canteen goes inside of it, so that when you want to make coffee, or you want to boil your water to, warm up your food or whatever. Well, that was in the old days. Now they have warmers inside the rations, but in any case, it was like a 2-for-1, right? And it went into the bottom of your canteen holder, the metal part, and then you slide the canteen. So this one can do the same thing. If you get a circular pouch, this folds up real compact, and it can go at the bottom of your pouch, and then you can stick a water bottle. So you have your water bottle, your can, and it's all in a pouch, and it's supposed to help it, because the pouch is like lined, so it's supposed to help the water stay cooler while it's in the pouch.
Nice. Remember that family buddy of mine I grew up with? His dad was a DAV, and his oldest brother went to the Marines. This is memory is from like back somewhere in the 80s. They always had MREs just kind of around. I think his older brother would send them, and they weren't for us. Like we were kids, but we would always be like, "Hey, what do you think that beef bolognese tastes like? Or, whatever the hell it was. And so we would bust one open, and we didn't know what we were doing. It was always horrible because we did it wrong. But you talking about supplies in the military when it comes to food and consumption and how you prepare it. It had that flashback of that brown plastic vacuum sealed MREs.
Yes. And I've got some reassuring news for you. There really is no way to do it wrong. So what you got was the way it was intended.
That was the intended experience. Bone appa fucking tea. You got.
Well, in the first Gulf War, our MREs, they didn't have a way to heat them, right? So again, if you wanted to like boil some water, and what we did is we ran a what was called a wash rack, and all these units would bring their vehicles, and we would run these steam cleaners, and they were diesel generated steam cleaners, because we had to get every granule of sand off of vehicles before we could load them back on the ship and bring them back to the U.S. because we could be bringing back like microbes and stuff. So this was hot jet blast steam,
right?
And so we would run the steam cleaners, and the rack, the area itself, or units would drive up their trucks. I mean, of course we did our own, but then we would run it for other units. And so what we used to do is put our packets on the exhaust of the steam cleaner, because it was a diesel engine, running the thing. So we would put it on the exhaust to get it warm, because, so now flash forward, 13 years later, 14 years later, when I'm in the second Gulf War, and they have these little heater packs built into the rations.
Okay.
And they stink like because I think it's like sulfur. I mean, so you rip it open and you throw in a little water and a chemical reaction happens, and then you stick your pouch in there, and then you watch it all bubble like, some witch's brew or something. And it just stinks to high heaven. And I'm like, okay, so how is this tactical, in the sense that when, you've got, 20 guys and girls, warming up their stuff, and that collective stench.
Yeah.
How do you not give away your position?
You guys are out there ripping a collective chemical fart all over the desert. Ripping ass.
Yeah. Just follow your nose. You'll find them.
Oh, it must be eating time. We'll go get them in 30 minutes when they're tired.
So yeah, it was. But we used them because most of the time, even though we were on a tactical mission, we were in a fortified position or what have you, and in the desert, you're there's times to be stealthy, and there's times where you don't really need to be. But
right,
but it was true even in Vietnam, in the jungle. There was a fish sauce, I think, that the Vietnamese knew enough not to eat when they were on, when the enemy was on combat missions. They would not eat that fish sauce because it would give you away like, a mile away. And so the soldiers loved it, right? So the Viet Cong would not eat it, and then the soldiers would eat it, and the Marines, and then that's how they would kind of find them, till they finally got wise. Say, hey, just stop eating this. It's a dead giveaway.
Yeah, I mean, even in the modern, civilian world, you mess around with fish sauce, you can smell it on yourself for like 3 days.
Yeah, exactly.
It is delicious.
So that's the story of my tin cup. And now my wife says I should be rattling this across a jail cell.
Well, if she gets her way.
Exactly. Or I can use this to, maybe dance a little dance or something, and maybe somebody will throw a couple coins in it or something.
Yeah, do a little soft shoe out in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Well,
help pay the bills.
And now there's some ridiculous dialogue around your tin cup.
The things we talk about.
I know. It's great. Well, we think it's great.
Yeah.
Last episode, that was a blast because we were all over the board. We went, I don't know, an hour plus, and we talked about efficiency methodologies. We talked about diet and exercise a lot. And one of my favorite portions, because this one, if you believe it the way we believe it and the way we spoke about it, we talk about our elders, and we've talked about mentorships and the good intentions, right? The altruistic approach. But then we even touched in a little bit on like the dream killers and be good, not better. And I think that's important to cover, because it's not all roses, not all insight or reaction or wisdom is some sage advice handed from the mountain that's meant to better you. Sometimes it's kind of meant to be a kind of a jab. Sometimes it's a light jab. Sometimes it's right on the nose. And that got me thinking, after that, there's also this kind of like, and this is something I think for listeners to really be aware of, is sort of the Svengali approach to mentorship, where someone's really trying to groom you to execute on their evil biddings. And that's a pretty like grand statement isn't the phrase, but like their intentions aren't always evil. They're just south of pure. So, it might be some older guy who wants to get younger chicks, so they're hanging out with a younger guy. Like there's not good intentions there. So I think that's something to really keep our eyes open to when we are looking for mentors or receiving, guidance from an elder.
That is an excellent point. And I would say that that's where the trust comes in, but not just trusting your mentor, but trusting yourself. If something doesn't feel right, either investigate or, back away entirely, give yourself some space. That is, wow. I mean, and it's sad that everything has a dark side, but at the same time, we do have to protect ourselves and even our loved ones. I mean, sometimes maybe the mentee isn't the target. Maybe somebody the mentee knows or is close to is the actual target, and there's a befriending going on.
Right.
So yeah, that's an unfortunate, reality. Hopefully not too common, but it's there.
It's there. So, yeah. And trust, I think you said, is really important. And that's something I think that needs to be, the strength of that should be tested with regularity, and sometimes I know ways you can test how solid or, strong that bond is to not always agree, kind of propose your own idea and follow it through and see how they react. If they get really, sour about it and they kind of try to make you feel bad about making your own decision, you might want to dig into that a little bit more. Like, what's really motivating them to be happy when I agree and unhappy when I disagree, right?
So then, I mean, and maybe that mentor isn't really looking to be a mentor, but more like some kind of an authority that's passing the only what they feel is the only truth, and anything counter to that or even slightly contrary to that, kind of brings down that authority, and so that's not really a mentor, right? I mean, that's just
it's a cult leader.
Yeah, yeah, essentially, right?
Agree with me, or you sleep outside, and I brand you.
Yes. Yeah. We shame you and we, exile you and everything else. But that, I mean, but you're right though, because a lot of what we talked about last week was that a good mentor won't give you the answers. A good mentor might know the answer or an answer. There's not always one answer, but the mentor may know an answer, but knows enough not to declare it at the beginning. Instead, allows the mentee to go through the exercise of arriving at an answer. Yeah. And that's where the double benefit comes in. If it's an answer, if the mentee comes up with an answer that the mentor didn't think of, well, then the mentor now just learned from the mentee, because the mentee isn't so close to it. And they're thinking, there's no boundaries on the thinking because you don't know the rules of constraint yet, right? Yeah. So in many cases, the mentor can learn from the mentee, and of course, insert your Star Wars reference here. But at the same time, a mentor who is seasoned and is secure in themselves will let the mentee go through that exercise because that's how you learn. If you're lectured to, that doesn't stand as good of a chance as if you went through the mental exercise yourself to arrive at an answer, and sometimes it might even be the same answer that the mentor already knew. But if it's a different answer, then you've both learned something at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun journey when done right. And I think that the expected outcome in mentorships is that you both develop, right? And just by handing out answers like candy, there's not a lot of development. It's enablement at that point. So, yeah, making them put in the work and arrive with 10 different solutions and narrow that down to finally one, that's development. My oldest nephew, who's now in the Air Force, and having a blast. He's having a great time. Yeah, he really is. He really, I think like in 10th or 11th grade of high school, he got super duper into music. He was playing sax. And, by the choice of that instrument, that's a little bit of a starting point or, launching point into the kind of music you're going to be playing or researching, the kind of greats you're going to be looking into and trying to maybe mimic their style or understand what made them great. And I know a lot about music. I don't know everything. I can't play music, but I just asked him to talk about it. Like we'd have these long conversations, and sometimes you get into a piece of the conversation where you're not talking about music specifically per se. You're talking about getting deep into something you're really interested in, exploring it to the edge, then telling yourself there is no edge, and then explore further and further as you get more comfortable with those boundaries, and you can start kind of breaking the rules. And it's just about discovery, and it's self-discovery, and it's discovering this whole new, institution that you knew nothing about, but millions of people have been living and thriving in for centuries. And so it's, we got into very broad conceptual exchanges, and then we weave in and out of music, and I couldn't pretend to be the authority on it, but hopefully, there was some transferable knowledge or discovery in those little sessions.
Well, and isn't that really kind of a metaphor for life, in the sense that whatever it is that you're passionate about, like you said, you're weaving in and out of music, but you're also applying it to other aspects. So, name your skill or your talent, and equate that to being a metaphor for life in general. Okay, and I think that as a mentor, you don't necessarily have to know it all.
No.
And I'll quote my dad again. He used to tell me, "A know-it-all usually doesn't."
Right.
And that in itself was pretty profound because, really nobody does like a know-it-all. And if you do purport to know it all, well, then you've just lost all your credibility. Because if you're open, no matter how long you've been doing said thing, no matter how long you've been doing it, you might be deemed an expert.
Yeah.
But even an expert would not declare themselves as the ultimate, knowledge of that topic. They even would say, "I'm still learning." At least the good ones. The ones that I would listen to would say, "I don't have all the answers, but I know where to go and look for a particular answer to a particular question." Right? But I'm, not necessarily a walking encyclopedia. And that's especially a challenge in the IT industry, is that in the IT industry, companies want to hire you based on your encyclopedic knowledge of standards and of, just different metrics of, not of measurement, but different metrics of bandwidth and all these really, they're static things. But over the years, an interview for an IT position evolved from a "why should we hire you" type discussion into a quiz show, right? Where, and I call them quiz show interviews, where they have a list. They may or may not themselves know the answers, but there's all the buzzwords crammed into one sheet of paper, where all the questions.
Yeah, a rapid fire Q&A, no soul.
Yeah, nothing. They don't want to know about you. They want to know what's in your brain.
Yeah.
And the minute you get one wrong, well, then you're disqualified, and they'll bring in the next contestant. And so I had made it very clear, if I was working with a headhunter or seeking out positions on my own, the one thing I stopped tolerating probably about a good 15, 20 years ago is no quiz show interviews. If you want to interview me as a person, as a problem solver, how do I think through things? Happy to share that. Happy to share real life experiences. Tell me a time when, and then insert your scenario, and then I'll speak to it if I've experienced it, or if I haven't, then I can speak to it as, how I would approach it based on the information being given to me at the moment. If there's new information or if there's more information, that answer may change. But the quiz show, no. And I even had an interview where the interviewer was, going down the list, and I said, okay, well, let me just say up front, I'm not very well versed in that particular discipline of IT. So any questions that you're going to ask me related to that, I'm not going to really know the answer to. And if that's what if you need somebody who's very strong in that area, then that really isn't me. And I just figured, I'd save us some time. Yeah. But if there are other areas that you want experience in, then by all means, let's focus on those questions. And they went right to the next question, which was still in the area I had very little knowledge of. They wouldn't go off script.
Man, I've been in quiz show, very on script, mandated from the C-level down, just go through the punch list. And I've been in interviews that seem so organic. You're like, wow, was that an interview? That was a really invigorating conversation. I learned a lot about them. I feel like they learned about me. And I can tell you from my own experience, the actual job experiences after those interview models, it was always better in the organic conversation style, because the employer, they're obviously a little bit more enlightened, or that's just their culture, which lines up with the culture you and I are talking about. But they get to hear a lot more and get more insight on your choice of words, or the way you kind of view that experience, what angle you viewed it at, not just on paper, but you as a human being, how you take in knowledge and then you kind of give that back out.
Yeah, and again, how you approach things, where how do you assess something, if you assess it at all. So, that's like with that quiz show interview, when they just kept asking the questions in the area that I had no knowledge of or very little knowledge of, I ended the interview. I said, well, I don't see why we're going to continue.
Have you ever done that? Have you shut it down?
I did. That one I did. Man. I shut it down. I said, well, I can tell that maybe you're looking for somebody who has more experience in that area, and that's fine, but I don't think I'm your guy.
But I'll take another cup of coffee and just sit in this room until our time is over.
Well, actually, no. I mean, it was a phone interview. It was a phone interview, and I was doing it out of my car because I didn't want my current employer to know. But it was one of those where it's like, okay, that told me a lot right there. Number one, that they weren't, I don't want to say smart enough, but they themselves weren't seasoned enough to understand what a waste of time looks like.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me, because I don't like wasting time, as we all know if you've listened to any of our episodes. But at the same time, I couldn't count on any support if this was to go further, or at the end of the day, I'm still not the guy they're looking for, and I just would have spent X amount of time extra to get the same result that I knew we were going to get, just a few minutes in when they wouldn't go off script. Now, there was another time, though, when I did interview for a position, and they actually flew me to Houston for the interview, and I was, sitting with, a senior person. He wasn't quite a director yet, but he was in a more senior IT level, and he was asking me about, if you're, at a client site, because this was for a consulting firm, if you're at a client site and they needed, an email server, how would you stand up a mail server? And I said, well, and I went through the steps, and they were very broad steps because it was a very broad question. And I was like, well, okay, I would, install, a server operating system on a, designated machine, and then would configure it for security, and then, configure the SMTP, email gateway for outbound email and make sure all the ports worked, and I went through all that. And he goes, okay, but how would you stand it up? And in my mind, I was like, I just told you. were you not listening?
Yeah.
I repeated. I said, well, like I said, I would, stand up the server and configure the server for, maximum security, put a server OS on it, and then put the SMTP, outbound gateway, run through all the tests, make sure it works. And he goes, yeah, but how? And so after the third,
click on
but how?
I navigate to that.
Because we're in an interview room, we're in a small space. There's no computer there, and nor was I going to do that on the spot because, why? So basically, when he asked the third, but how? I said, well, I don't really think I'm understanding your question, so I don't think I'm going to answer it to your satisfaction. Because I don't have a lot of information based on the question, and I was just going through the broad steps of, what I think you would normally do. Not saying, so in other words, I didn't say, well, I'm going through the steps that you would do to stand up a server. I'm saying I would go through the steps I would think you would normally do to stand up a server. But anything more detailed than that, I don't know what you're looking for in that answer. And he went on to the next question. He said, okay, fair enough. And I thought, I'm not getting the job. But I got the job.
Okay. Wow.
I ended up getting the job. And then on my very first assignment, he was basically our program lead for that client engagement. Okay. So I ended up working under him, not directly, but I was on his overall team on my first assignment. And he was actually excited to have me. He actually asked for me to be on.
Huh.
So I think in that answer, just being honest, maybe did something where he knew he could trust me.
Yeah, because that could go either way. Like a little sour note in an interview, it's sometimes hard to recover from because you're strangers, right? There's no credit in each other's bank for those moments. So you're just like, wow, we're not communicating well.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I didn't say it bluntly. I said, I was as diplomatic as I could be, but sometimes, when the answer is no, right? Or in my case, I was saying I don't know, but I was expressly stating why I don't know, and that's because I didn't have every bit of information to give you a detailed answer that you're looking for. So if you want to give me more details, we can whiteboard it and do all that. That was all the unspoken stuff. But if you want to give me details, we can whiteboard it. If not, and we're just talking, face to face, then I don't know what else you could be looking for. And although I don't know, I never really asked him. But I would think that, especially when we're talking about a consulting position where you're going to be with clients and big clients. I mean, this was a very big consulting firm. They went for the big boys. And I think if anything, it reassured him that if I don't know something, then I'm not going to bullshit him.
Yeah.
You see, and maybe that built trust. Like, okay, I mean, he tried, right? In other words, I'm thinking as the interviewer, well, he tried a couple of times, and then I pushed back because maybe that's what a client would do, and push back. And I'm going to be vague, but I want you to be specific. Right. Yeah. You see, so maybe he was simulating a client interaction, and then I didn't lose my cool. I didn't get flustered. I didn't, pound my fists on the desks. I just said, well, for the information I'm being given, I don't know that I have enough to give you the kind of detailed answer that you'd be looking for. Which gave him the option to either give me more detail or we could move on to the next thing, because I wasn't going to. It was clear I wasn't going to give him anything more because my answer didn't change.
Right. Yeah. Again, I feel like it's one of those things, depending on all the dynamics of interviews, it could have gone either way, but it sounded like it ended up working out well. Not just in the fact that you got the job, but the sort of like credibility you sort of earned right there on the spot, and that seemed to put you in good graces with him.
And isn't that the tone you kind of want to set when you first start somewhere with anything? I don't mean just IT, but wouldn't you rather come in being called a straight shooter than, well, you got to watch out for this guy because if he doesn't know an answer, he gets really slippery.
Yeah.
I'd rather be known as the straight shooter.
Yeah, I like throwing out ideas, but that's when we're in a no bad ideas session. Not just grabbing stuff out of the air to make myself appear as an authority. At this point in like both our careers, you can pull upon experience, whether it's and I feel like this is exactly what we're talking about. Whether it's experience with this very specific niche vocation, or you zoom out and it's experiences of this type, how to navigate this very specific interaction, right?
Agreed. I've been agreed. I have probably been doing more interaction coaching in the past 2 weeks than I have in the past 2 years, maybe even longer. Just in the sense that we're trying to hash out all my dad's final resting details, and there are different personalities at play. And I know what I want, and that is what my dad wants. Nothing more, nothing less. No deviations, no interpretations, no, but what if? No, if he said it, that's what needs to happen. Said it meaning on paper. And so I find myself coaching, like, while not trying to play favorites, I find myself coaching folks in my family, both immediate and extended, on how to actually engage in a conversation where basically everything's a negotiation. And it's sad to say, I mean, my father's funeral and his services aren't a business negotiation, at least not from our perspective, maybe for the funeral home. But at the same time, though, I find that as I'm coaching different family members on how to approach things a little less, aggravated and a little less, dig your heels in and I'm right and fold your arms and, and then nobody's listening to one another, because you've all done that. I find myself really advising them and encouraging them to open up. Like, instead of saying how something's going to be, why don't you ask how they think something's going to be? And then you can discuss what your idea of what something's going to be. And now it's a discussion. And that takes more time. But you can dig in your heels, say you're right, and then, alienate everyone around you who doesn't agree with you. Or you can all talk it through and you can all understand why you have an opinion on a certain thing. And that opinion might make sense. Or they might help you understand why your opinion may not make the most sense in the, in the grander scheme of what somebody else wants, in regards to their death. And so I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do look at life as a series of negotiations, and that doesn't mean it's all business. What it means is that we all have wants, we all have needs, and you can't arrive at a mutual agreement until you understand what those wants and the needs are of the person that you're sitting across from. And so when it comes to that, I even try to approach the interviews the same way. This is a negotiation, and if I don't know an answer, I'll say this is my favorite go-to line. So, write this down if you need to, because this has gotten me through so many interviews. If I don't know the answer, I will flat out say, I don't know the answer, and rather than make one up and be wrong, I would like the opportunity to research that answer and provide you that answer after this interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me follow up with you on that, which I think demonstrates a lot of sort of self-confidence. And then, like, look, I don't know it, but I know I can find the answer, just not right here on the spot.
Right.
And I'm accountable enough to follow up with you on that.
Well, and then do it, right? Actually do it. And I'll tell you, when I first got into the information security discipline of IT, I haven't been in information security my whole career. I've had different focuses, different areas of specialty throughout my 30 plus years. But when I was first getting into security, I was in an interview, and my interviewer was asking me a lot of those. It wasn't a quiz show, but he was asking me some very technical questions for some things that I hadn't had to think about for at least 10, 15 years. So again, I'm not a walking encyclopedia. I'll retain what I need to retain, and will have to sometimes put away that which I don't need every day, right? So I told him, I don't know the answer, but I would really appreciate the opportunity to research it and provide you with an answer. And we did it on 3 questions. And he said, okay, that'll be fine. And so naturally I thought, okay, well, he said it's fine, but I probably don't have the job, but I'm going to do it anyway. And what I did was, not only did I research the answer, but I, even in my email response to him, I thanked him for giving me the opportunity to research the answer. And then I said something like, because I don't like not knowing something, something like that. But I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to provide these answers for you. And then I said, but rather than copy and paste from a web page, I'm going to summarize my understanding of the web page that has the answer. Meaning, I'm going to write it up myself. I'm not going to just, boom, it's not going to cookie cutter it.
Well, as they say, in your own words.
Yes. So I did that with all 3. And again, not expecting anything. I just, once again, thanked him. And if there's anything else you'd like to discuss, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to talk with you again. And again, I sent it thinking I probably didn't get the job, but I was grateful because now I knew those answers, you see, and that made me a better person, because now I remembered something that I hadn't had to remember for years on end.
Yeah.
So I was grateful, because that interview at the end of it all made me a more knowledgeable person, right?
Yeah, there was 2 opportunities there for you, right? Potentially.
Yeah. And you know what? I got the job.
Yeah.
I got the job.
If I could dip back into the word negotiation real quick.
Sure.
Word meanings are really important to me. I mean, I don't know. I feel like they should be to all of us, but the common sort of misunderstanding of the word argument it's just opposing viewpoints going back and forth. And the word negotiate, it's just, let's figure out how we're going to get through this and get through it. You can negotiate the side of a mountain with your body. That's what that word means. Even like the word purchase, you can only have so much foot purchase on a rock. And that has to do with the space provided and the amount of security you can get from it. So we have all these words that we just kind of lazily use for singular reasons. Mm-hmm. But yeah, negotiate doesn't mean, all right, I'm going to put on my toupee and my plaid pants and my polyester shirt and swindle you. It just means let's agree how we're going to get through this together.
Very well said. An adversary is another one of those words that seems to have a negative connotation, right? And like you said, an argument isn't rooted in hostility. An argument is rooted in differences of ideas.
There it is.
Right?
Yeah.
So your adversary is not your mortal enemy that you must fight to the death. Your adversary is the person who disagrees with you or has a different point of view. And even in contract negotiations, your adversary is the person that you're negotiating with to land a contract.
Right. Which immediately draws up visuals of like swords and shields and
because you're a worthy adversary. So we've seen it in too many swashbuckling movies. But you're right. And if you really drill even deeper into that, you can't have a successful or productive discussion, negotiation, agreement, you name it. You can't have any of those unless you're both speaking the same language. Mm-hmm. And even though you're saying the same words, that doesn't mean you're speaking the same language, in that you may have a different understanding of a word than I do.
Yeah.
And that's why I think people think legalese is just so tedious, because in legalese, you have to define everything so that there is no ambiguity.
Right.
You see? And so I think in a lot of today's conflicts of ideas, and I think that the frustration, at least my observation is that this frustration comes from, well, I said this thing and you're denying that it exists. Well, but what you're saying about this thing, does that really mean what you think it means, or does it mean what I think it means?
Like the Princess Bride. I do not think it means what you think it means.
and think about that, right? It's basically where there are certain words that are buzzwords on, each side of a camp, and yet each side carries a different definition of the same word, even though you're using the same word. So if I'm saying, green, can we agree that this is green? Well, if green means a combination of, blue and red, then we can agree that's green. But if you think that green is a combination of, blue and
yellow,
black, or yellow, then we're obviously amiss.
Yeah, and I think that's where
we're never going to agree.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. That speaking the same language. There's a funny little saying about England and the U.S. Wow, what is it? Two countries separated by a common language or something. And I think that's where you find yourself in these conversations or arguments where they just start becoming circular and repetitive, because you're trying to make your point, like the interview. I mean, as you were describing that to me, it started to sound like the definition of insanity. Like, you keep asking the same question with the same words. Let's maybe diversify the approach, and going back to like whether it's domestic conversations or arguments, or it's with friends or at work. Yeah, not understanding fully what the the weight, gravity, meaning, importance of all the words that your adversary is using, that can be actually bad for you. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're missing their point, not the point, but their point, right? Because there's you, me, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. So to me, that's the point. Like what's really happening that neither one of us can see because we're so deep in the trees. But yeah, really good.
Well, and not so deep. We may have reached a false agreement because.
Right.
You're agreeing to a word that I said because you think that word means what's agreeable to you, and I think the word what's agreeable to me. So we shake hands on it,
right?
And then I end up doing the opposite of what you think we agreed to.
Right.
But I'm like, but we said we would do that,
right?
And you're like, not that, and so
yeah, we said that, but not your version of that.
Not your version of that, exactly.
Yeah.
Now this brings about it was an audio book that I listened to called Start With No by Jim Camp. And, you know, we're going to add that in the show notes. Start With No by Jim Camp. It was an audio book. I guess you can find it in, you know, paperback and what have you. But it was a profound audio book in that it was about the art of negotiation. And Jim Camp was a door-to-door salesman who really got tired of having doors slammed in his face. And he, you know, obviously when you're a door-to-door salesman, your livelihood depends on you making sales. And so he thought to himself, how can I, you know, and remember that's my favorite internal question is how can I get fewer doors, you know, slammed in my face, and how can I open more doors? And so he just decided to try, starting with no. Basically, you know, I think he was selling like vacuum cleaners or, you know, bottled water or something. But
so this was a while ago.
Yeah, yeah. And so it was basically, and I'm paraphrasing because I hadn't listened to it in a while, but I still think of it whenever I hear the word negotiation. I think of this audiobook. And basically, he said, look, I'm here to talk about this, and let's go ahead and assume that you don't want it. Let's assume you're going to say no. Now, with that assumption, I'd like to still tell you about this product and A, B, C, and D. But we're starting with no. We already know it's a no.
Right.
And so it kind of disarms somebody, doesn't it? I mean, it disarms them like, oh, because people think salesmen are like Jedi masters where they're going to mind trick you into buying something you didn't really want or need.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there to do that. And he made that pretty clear up front. We're going to start with no. If you don't need it, you don't need it. However, I would feel better if you were to know some of the things that this can do so that if you ever change your mind, I'd be the first person you'd call. And again, I'm paraphrasing. So I listened to this audiobook. I started it a couple of days before, not because I knew I was going into a negotiation, but it just happened that I was starting to listen to it a couple of days before I entered a negotiation for my own consulting practice to take on a new client. And I was also listening to it on the way to the meeting. And one of the things he would say is a typical exchange might go, you know, hey, potential client, I want to do services for you. I think, you know, we can do a great job. And the potential client says, yeah, sounds good. Why don't you drop a proposal and send it to me and I'll have a look at it. And for him, his favorite retort to that was, yeah, I can drop a proposal, but what would it say? And that would kind of catch the client off guard. Like, well, what do you mean? You want to do services? Yeah, but which services are going to best suit you and best address your needs? And so again, you can't keep things too vague, too general. You need to drill down into those details. And when somebody, again, like you said, lazily says, yeah, well, drop a proposal and I'll have a look. That's too lazy. It's too broad. You really want to narrow it down because that's the definition of a scope, right? And if you don't have a scope as to what you're going to be doing, you don't know if you did a good job or not because there was nothing to measure it against.
Yeah. Yep.
So you have to be specific, but you also have to encourage the adversary that you're, speaking with to be specific so that you can then have specific solutions or approaches that meet that. And then you both know what a good job looks like.
Yeah, I think it saves everybody a lot of time. And, like by asking those questions up front, one internally gives you a green or a red light. Am I even going to, waste time on this? Are they asking for something that's relevant to something I do well or something people give me money for? But yeah, it helps define scope. And I often find clients across the board, they know what they want very specifically down to the dollar. And some don't know what really a scope is. And I've got different ways of approaching that. Like for the no scope ones, hey, here's a bunch of questions. At your leisure, respond, and I might not have another round of questions, but at least this will help my proposal start to take shape.
Well, and it gauges their seriousness. If they're willing to answer the questionnaire, that means they want the help. If they don't, that just means they were giving you lip service. And that, again, that's not a bad thing per se. Sometimes people don't know how to say no. So they'll kind of, put you off or do things that kind of put you off in the future. And, I'll get back to you. That's usually the fair. I'll get back to you. And then you never do. Right. But if you're asking somebody for specifics, you're not asking them for how to solve their own problem. You're asking them though, what problem did you want solved? Like you said, so I can determine if my solutions are a match for your problem, right? I'm not going to create a problem for my solution. Right. A real salesperson would say, look, you've got a problem, and this is why I think that what I've got right here would solve that problem. Not because I want you to spend money just to spend money. It's because I want it to actually solve a problem for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Back on the start with no thing, I'm not a expert or even a novice at psychology, but I have to think in the sort of, pitch and receive dynamic of, oh, hey, buddy, thanks for showing up on my doorstep unannounced. The receiver, the potential prospect, they're sitting on no, and they're just looking for a gap in the conversation to politely or directly or rudely say no. And they oftentimes don't hear what's being sent to them because all they're focused on is finding a gap to say no. So this guy gets the elephant, in the room and goes, all right, let's pretend you've had a chance to say that. Now they're not thinking about it anymore. They're thinking about, okay, I've already got my out.
Right.
It's been given. I don't need to focus on it this entire conversation. So yeah, what do you got to say?
Exactly. And then once again, though, the yes becomes the prospect's idea, not the salesperson's.
Right. Yeah, it's a reversal. It's a switch. It's pretty smart.
While disarming at the same time. And disarming not in the sense that you're vulnerable disarmed. Disarmed in the sense that you don't have the walls up, that you're not able to take in anything new.
Yeah.
And potentially beneficial. Potentially. Right?
Yeah. That's great. That's great stuff. You want to take a little break and then start the show?
Yeah, we were on a roll, weren't we? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a break.
Awesome.
If you're interested in learning more about today's topic, be sure to sign up for our email list at hdtwoshow.substack.com and subscribe to our email list to have the show notes delivered right to your inbox.
And we're back.
We're back. Oh, did we time
Fresh
it?
Coffee.
Yeah. Got that caffeinated freshness.
And the taste of my tin cup.
So did you get that recently, or have you had that a while?
I got it about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And again, I bought it for the express purpose of, because I got a coffee warmer at the same time.
Yeah.
And I bought my wife a coffee warmer. And in order to, because I buy her things that I think she might like, and then she ends up like not using them, so I end up wasting a lot of money. So this time I said, I bought a warmer for your coffee to have on your desk, because, since she works from home now, or mostly at home now, so you can keep your coffee warm. But then I had to think, but if she says no to the coffee, like, I don't want to keep my coffee warm, which, yes, she said, what else could it be used for? So I bought her a candle in a jar, and you can put that on the warmer. And instead of lighting the wick, it warms the wax and it aromates the room.
Lets off the perfume.
Yeah. So now she only uses it for that.
Well, that's fantastic, man. Switcheroo.
Anyway,
I like it. That cup reminds me of as a kid, we camped a lot. Pretty rough style. Nothing fancy. It was like pup tent on the ground.
Same here.
Oh, yeah. And it was like, and a sleeping bag usually, but you could feel whatever was on the ground under the tent while you slept. And like usually near a body of water. So that's where you would bathe in the morning, and nice river or something. And there's always campfires, and it was always, the typical fare is hot dogs or can of beans or maybe an egg if we really had our shit together. We got some perishables.
Really? I remember the smell of bacon out in the woods, man. That was like a great smell.
It, but I have to think it happened. It'd be like corned beef hash because that's super easy and tasty.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah. It takes me back to all that. And of course, marshmallows. That was a staple with kids. One time we, I don't know what our dad was thinking, but he, my sister, and me, we camped at this Boy Scout camp where we knew the director. He was a family friend, and to the point to where like they would hang out at his house and drink wine and smoke pot while we played at the pool table downstairs. And off season, he said, "You guys can come stay whenever." Like we'd stay in the cabins, like the legit Boy Scout log cabins. This was also in the day where Friday the 13th was on everybody's mind, the movie series, or the movie at that time.
Yeah.
And those cabins on that lake scared the living shit out of me. But anyway, this one time it was just the three of us, and we camped, and he woke up and went to work. I guess he showered at work and went and had his work day. So my sister and I woke up by ourselves. I'm like, I don't know, 10. So she would be about 13 or somewhere around there, 9 and 12. And our dog was with us. And so I guess I was always a really adventurous kid. I loved to explore. I loved to just see what was out there, So I walked up to the main supplies building where you could get canoes and paddles and anything to do stuff with bow and arrow, all that stuff. So I got a canoe, and I was like, I'm going to paddle from here to our campsite. And I'm a kid. And our dog started to follow me into the lake. And I'm like, oh, dumb dog, I'll just paddle faster, and she'll get discouraged, and she'll go back to shore, and she'll run the main 2-track back to the campsite. So I'm paddling fast, so there's more distance, and here she comes, and you can see her, she's coming for me and swimming doggy paddle. And I'm like, oh shit, she's so far committed in now. If I don't turn around, I started to really worry for her. So I turn around and I approach her sideways with the canoe. And, I do what I can to get her front legs in. And as soon as I got her front legs in, like past the dog elbow, mm-hmm. I was like, okay, this is a real critical moment. We're going to make it or drink it. And I got lucky. I positioned myself just right, got my feet in front of me and my backside way behind the counter, and just started hoisting her in. And of course, she's trying to help with scratching her little back legs and stuff. And she finally got a leg over, and she was in, and she was happy as a clam. And we paddled back to the campsite. And, I was a strong swimmer. I grew up in the Great Lakes state. So like I'd fallen into rivers canoeing before, like rapid rivers, and you just gotta come up with a plan fast. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't worried about myself. I remember that like she's an animal. She would have been fine probably looking back. And as a kid, it might have just been 100 yards, but to me it seemed like I was halfway through the lake. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. That's a camping memory, and you know what it is. It's an autonomous moment where you feel like you were tested and you succeeded, and I think that's why it really, sticks with me still today.
I think it was a good move to help the dog. I mean, because sometimes, and I think maybe with dogs, maybe more than I don't know a bear. I think dogs tend to be a more emotional animal than others. Yeah. And so the dog may have been leading with its emotion of, I want to get to you no matter what, not realizing that if you were to have left it, it may very well have not been able to make it back to shore.
Yeah, you're right. Oops. And you're right. I think there's this kind of like, why are you leaving me to, kind of playing on that idea of dogs and their emotions, and it might have chipped away at her loyalty later. She might have been like, weeks later, like, oh, usually I jump in front of you and bark, but I'm just going to let you handle this on your own. A pedantic dog. It's like, remember that time you screwed me and left me in the middle of the goddamn lake?
Yeah, so loyalty is not taken for granted with a dog. That's the lesson we're learning.
Yeah, you do your job, I'll do mine. Agreed. So funny. So, how was your week, man?
The week that's a hard one to answer. First of all, it was nice and warm and full of electricity, so that was a good thing.
Nice change.
Yeah. Work-wise, it's still great. I mean, I just got a 3-year plan just got unveiled to me earlier in the week, and typically when there's like more work involved, I'm like, slow clapping, yay, But this time, the 3-year roadmap that we have set out for my particular team is exciting. So it's very thrilling, something I can really sink my teeth into. And then, as with all things, not extremely stressful. It's not, at least here, not life and death, even though the simplest things, the most trivial things can be life and death somewhere else at another firm. So,
right. Yeah.
So, you get the challenge, and you also get the ability to kind of raise your hand and say, okay, I'm taking on too much, too quick. Can we slow it down? And they're happy to do that. Which I haven't gotten there yet, not by any stretch. And then it's kind of spending the week trying to help get, my dad's, services and funeral, trying to help in whatever way I can. I'm not planning any of it. But again, as I'd mentioned earlier, just trying to help those that are planning it be able to see each other and not through each other as to, really what that memorial and burial would look like together or separately if needed. Two different members of the family, each doing their own thing. So what does that look like? So,
it sounds like you've got the patience of a saint that plays a role of peacekeeper.
I do, because it's my dad, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, both sides that are opposing each other are both women, and that presents a challenge because, and again, I'm going to probably get in trouble for stereotyping, and thank goodness my wife's not here because she gets very mad when I.
Well, you can talk about them as individuals, like these.
Yeah. Okay. So then these two women which aligns with my experience of a lot of other women. So I won't say all women.
Right.
They're a combination of emotional and headstrong, and both want to do what they think is right by my dad. And I can't say any one of them is wrong in trying to adhere to what my dad wanted, but maybe one is being a little more, shall we say, interpreting things a little more loosely than the other. And so anyway, it's one of those where it's hard not to pick sides. And so I have picked a side, but that doesn't mean that I'm out to destroy the person that I don't agree with. It's a matter of helping that person, at least my mission, is to maybe help that person see the benefit of maybe abandoning some of the more, the more loosely interpreted elements, and maybe go with a little more of the straightforwardness that my dad wanted.
To the letter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to the letter, right? I mean, why add to that if you don't need to? He wanted it simple. Why are we complicating this? That's kind of what's going through my mind. So I guess I'm using my influence to try to influence that person to maybe dial back some of the extras that are being added in that he didn't really say he wanted, but he also didn't say he didn't want. But sometimes when you say something, like when you state something in its simplest terms, like it was a 2-step deal: cremation and burial, right? He didn't say anything about memorial service. He didn't say anything about anything, receptions and catered events and none of that. So I'd like to think that if he wanted that, he would have stated that.
Yeah.
So, but others might say, well, he didn't say he didn't want it, so why can't we do that if that's what we want to do?
Right. And if we can all collectively agree we should do nothing, not stuff that we've all imagined.
Well, no, not really do nothing, but each do it their way that they believe is the right way, right? So you've got one of the ladies that would do the extras, and then you got the other lady that would want to do to the letter. And I'm more in the to the letter camp. For good, bad, or indifferent, that's where I land. But I've been spending the last 2 weeks, after work, weekends, working the phones like a politician, just trying to, and I'm not trying to just push my views. I take the time to listen to why somebody thinks differently.
Hey, let me ask you a question out of my own curiosity. Are you surprised? Because, I think about, thankfully, both my sets of parents have their affairs in order, and, everything's real clear. But then people get weird, right? People get weird. And it makes me start to think like, man, is my sister just going to pull out the bitch card and all of a sudden go left? And I'm like, who are you? And in that scenario, I'd be very surprised. Are you finding yourself surprised, or is this pretty predictable behavior?
That's a hard one to answer, because the person that is wanting to add the extras, it's no surprise that she wants to add the extras.
Yeah.
It's also no surprise that she wants everything her way.
Yeah.
So that part is no surprise. I can't really say I'm surprised that we're all kind of, we're all kind of like jumping in with our own opinions and whatnot. I'm not really surprised about it. I guess I'm disappointed that something so common is also happening in this instance, right? In other words, you hear a lot about, families kind of arguing and stuff, and so the fact that we're no different kind of disappoints me a little bit. Like,
sure,
yep, we're every bit. Granted, that makes us human, but I know my dad tried to specify everything to eliminate this very thing, and yet we're still doing it. And so that's the disappointing part, is that there's always somebody who thinks they know better. That, well, he must have meant this. Well, he didn't say it though. And there's always that person that says, yeah, but I know he would have wanted. No, you don't know what he would have wanted, because then he would have said what he wanted. So,
yeah.
You know, it's one of those, the letter or the spirit, you know, which do you go with?
Yeah, man, I don't envy that position. I hope that, you know, because I think, you know, as we all get up there in years, especially my parents, despite what I say, they have their affairs in order. There's going to be stickiness. I think it's always there somewhere. But just the idea of like handling their affairs and closing down their estates, that in itself, just the going through these, you know, well plotted steps, that in itself is enough. You know, it's hard. I imagine it's very hard. And then you add in that bullshit, you know, it takes away from everybody else.
That it does. And the person that wants to add these extras, I mean, she was named the executor of his trust and his will. So she feels that she's got, you know, the law on her side, being that she was named.
Yeah.
And yet the other is a grieving widow. And so, you know, you would think, well, the grieving widow would have rights too, or would have a say. So again, letter or spirit, right? The letter says this is the person that's going to execute the will and the trust. That's what was specified on paper. And yet you have a grieving widow. They were only married 6 weeks. And so, you know, does she have enough tenure to earn a seat at the table? I say yes, you know,
right.
Even if it was for one day,
right.
You know. So again, there's a lot of questions, and it did prompt my wife and I, you know, and I even told my wife, I said, look, every time I bring it up, you say that's morbid and we shouldn't think about that, blah, blah, blah. We need to.
Yeah.
We need to be unambiguous.
Yeah.
And we even need to put in, kind of like the founding fathers, we need to put in a safeguard if there is ambiguity that we didn't anticipate. So we'll put in safeguards to say if something isn't specified or isn't named, this will be the default.
Right.
You know, because like my dad wouldn't have wanted all of us arguing with one another, I wouldn't want my kids to, you know, strain their relationship over some things.
Yeah. Out of being confused and trying to do what they each think is the right thing by you,
or what they think they're entitled to.
That too.
That also plays a part, right? There's conversations of entitlement in these discussions that I've been having.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm his firstborn biological son. So if we want to talk entitlement, yeah, let's go there. But I don't want to go there. You see, because I want what my dad wants.
Yeah.
I don't care what I think I'm entitled to. If we are to talk entitled, if we're to engage on those terms, though, I'd be entitled to a hell of a lot more than a lot of other people in that conversation.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You'd be entitled to the crown, the throne, the kingdom.
But on paper, it says differently.
Yeah.
You know? But
wenches be cast.
Yeah. The good news to all this, and I did state this yesterday in a conversation. The good news is that this is a temporary thing. This will soon subside. This will soon be over. And not like, thank God, it's one of those where hopefully we can put my dad to rest in the way that he wanted, in a way that everyone else can be happy. But I told the executor of the trust, I said, even though I don't agree with this person, I said, you need to understand you're never going to make everyone happy in this.
Yeah.
No matter what you do, no matter which way you go, no matter how righteous you think you are, you're never going to please everybody. So that's probably the biggest thing you'll need to get used to ASAP.
That's true. It's 100% true.
So yeah. So how was your week? Hopefully better than mine.
Yeah. Better than what you're describing. You know, it's been really busy this year. Anything online and digital has just been slammed, and I've been fortunate. Like, you know, I've told you, I think on the shows and in person, like, just don't have any free time. I just have to steal it, instead of working 9 to 5, I'm working 5 to 9. And hey, look, there's other things I could be complaining about. So that's as much as I'll say. But there's weeks where I feel like I'm barely holding it together, meaning there's just kind of this nag where, oh God, I think if anything sort of doesn't fall perfectly in line, I'm going to disappoint somebody. And I would rather underpromise and overdeliver than give just what's expected. And so I have to give myself a little bit of slack and go, well, as long as you're giving what's expected, don't beat yourself up too much. When the opportunities are there within the realm of reality, you can go back to being, awesome. But for now, at least deliver, fair exchange value for dollar. And this week, I don't think I let anybody down. I did get a call back for some referral business that I had done, and they came back to me, which is great. That's basically how I, make my living, is through word of mouth, and people, and a lot of loyalty. I had a new client call, which was also a referral in the consumer packaged goods e-commerce space. They're great people. The referral, the client that referred them, and they themselves, they make healthier foods. Like, it's right up my alley. It's the kind of stuff that I'm like, oh yeah, grain-free donuts, sure. Or healthy popsicles. I'll take 2, please. What else? Oh, oof, this is a big one. I signed up for an 85-mile bike journey, and it's a combo of flat road, hilly road, and a bunch of trails. I won't make it. I won't do the whole thing. If I do half of it, I'll feel very proud of myself. But they call it the burrito buffet, and it's out here in this area. And it's basically an 85-mile predetermined track where you get into some trails for half an hour, you come back up above ground, and you go on to the next park or trail network. You get in there and beat yourself up, and you come out and go to the next one, and there's plenty of stores and places to stop. The end point, the finish line, is at a pretty well-known local Austin burrito joint. That's the thing. That's your reward, is you get yourself a big fat ass burrito. I tracked this. There's this guy, he's about my age, and his son, they must be like race. They have to compete. I looked at their journey. They did it once. That's the first time it got on my radar several months ago. I'd actually crossed paths with them while they were en route on this specific run. And he burned like 8,000 calories, so basically 100 calories per mile, something like that.
Wow.
So got to, train, got to carb up, got to be ready for it on the day with plenty of supplements.
Or in my case, be in a fasted state, and I would come on the other side 3 pant sizes smaller.
You'd wither away in real time. Man, yeah. I mean, I'm going to take some heavy, sort of like substantial snacks with me.
Well, the life coach in me is about to show.
Let's have it.
So when it comes to not finishing the course, you seem pretty confident that you won't finish.
I don't think I will. I have to live in the realm of reality. The longest ride I've ever done that's kind of modeled the same way is 30 miles. And that was just like, whoa, that was a lot. And to think that I could jump into 85 miles and hang with the guys that do these, I think I'd be fooling myself. If I do it, like, I have the fight in me, but if I do it, great. I did it. Mm-hmm. Wow. Let's do the 100-mile one. But I also have to, be honest with myself.
Well, it sounds like there's two qualifiers here to consider that ride a success. Number one is finishing the course, which is all of 85 miles, mm-hmm. and keeping up with the studs in the pack. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What if you were to just do one and not necessarily both?
No, I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine finishing alone. I'd be fine doing halving it on their back tire.
Okay.
Honestly, I'd be fine doing half of it alone. It's my point. It's ambitious, and I'll take it either way. I think it's the guy who coordinated it. He is a stud. This guy's insane. Like I look at his times and the durations that he rides. Not necessarily the tracks and the courses. We all ride the same tracks and courses. This guy is fast, and he travels around the U.S. and bikes here and bikes there. He's not my hero. He seems like a fine guy, but he coordinated it, and I was like, if I can hang with this guy for 20 miles, that in itself is an achievement. Because he's, he's
a pro.
He's insane. What was the word? Trail beast was the word I used.
Wow. Trail beast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you sure you're not worried they'll run out of burritos, so you're going to have it so you can get there first?
Oh, yeah. Like, get one at the start and stick it in the car.
A veggie burrito, right?
All veg. Oh, man, they make the best all veg burritos. They're fantastic. I might need to get two. My body won't even realize I ate the first one. It was like, right. What was that?
Yeah. Instant drainage of the tank there.
Yeah.
Well, good luck. When is that race supposed to happen?
8 days.
8 days from now.
Yeah. Tomorrow I'm going to do distance ride. Remember after last week's show, I sent you that halfway point.
You did.
That ended up being a 28-mile ride. I didn't prep for it, so I came back with a little bit of the shakes, the no sugar in my body shakes. I was I need to get something in there. I didn't prep. I didn't bring enough stuff. I just took one bottle of what am I trying to say? Electrolyte water,
Yeah.
So that was my own stupidness. I want to try to maybe get in 30 to 40, and that was all road top. I don't even think there was no trails. It was just endurance. It was distance. So I'll try to push that tomorrow.
Well, I need to thank you for sending me that, because that made me feel, seeing your map and everything made me feel like I had a workout, so I had to go lay down after that. So thanks for my workout.
Anytime. Actually, scheduled for tomorrow, so you can thank me in advance. Yeah, I mean, those, honestly, it's a big deal. Like, I see those as little wins. Like, wow,
absolutely.
And what happens, going back to that adventurous spirit, I get bored running the same rides all the time. I have favorites. It's like, because you kind of want to hit the numbers. Like, I want to ride for an hour or a half hour, so you have predictable tracks that you go. But when you push past the boundaries, which to me is where the rewards are, they're just on the other side of that sort of self-imposed boundary.
Yes.
And again, we're not talking about specifically riding bikes. We're talking about everything in life. That self-imposed boundary, there's a reward on the other side. It's not immediately on the other side. It might be 3 miles out, 20 miles out, but it's there for you to find and earn. So, that was an example of me pushing it, just going and saying, oh, that was a nice little win. So next time I'll try 35 or 40. Maybe in 8 days I do 85. Mm-hmm. Probably finishing by myself.
2 days later.
I need some camping
Everyone's gone
gear.
home. The burrito shop's closed.
I need to bring my pup tent and sleep on the ground with my cup.
There's a Navy SEAL or an ex-Navy SEAL. And I think his name is David Goggins, I think. We'll put the right name in the show notes and maybe a link to his book. He actually has a book about, kind of mental fortitude and stuff. And basically, I've seen a couple of YouTube, recap videos, just real quick summations of kind of what his philosophy is. And that is that when you think you're done physically and mentally, when you think you're done physically, you're basically only at 50%.
Ha! Wow.
And I would be, I'm going to be completely honest, I would be scared to test that theory. I would be scared.
Yeah.
Not because I always give it my all, but we have that red line that says if you go past this, you may very well die.
Right. Oh yeah. The older you each year, that gets calibrated a little differently.
Yeah, it does. Yep. It does.
Yeah.
But I found that fascinating in that I don't know if you train incrementally toward that, or incrementally past that 50%, like, okay, 50%, you're only halfway there, but maybe this time you go 60%.
Yeah.
And then you back off. So it not almost. It would be interesting to maybe read his book and see what he says about that. Or because again, as a Navy SEAL, you're going to get pushed well past your perceived limits. And we've talked about perceived limits in previous episode where, like you just mentioned, if you can blow past your perceived limits, that's a big win. Huge.
Yeah. Yep.
But at the same time, to even try to wrap my head around the notion of, going past our perceived limits, even if it's 10% for that 110%, that's big. Yeah. But if you're saying you can go 200% and still be standing and conscious and have all your faculties about you, and maybe that's not even a condition, right? I mean, maybe you lose control of your faculties, but you finished because you were only halfway there.
Right.
I mean, who knows what entirely spent really looks like?
What you're kind of like sculpting out of the rock, I feel like, is today's 200% is tomorrow's 100%, and it's relative.
Very much so, but also I think that our bodies lie to us.
Yeah, to protect themselves. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I remember when we had our discussion about diet and eating plans, and I was talking about intermittent fasting and how ghrelin prompts you to think you're hungry because it makes rumbling sounds, and you're like, "Ooh, I must be hungry," but your body's actually lying to you because you're not really hungry because if you're a hefty person, then you have plenty of fat store for your body to feed off of, right? So your body's essentially lying to you, and so. Again, I'm conjecturing. I can't really say much because I haven't read the book, but I almost wonder if that's the underlying meaning here is that your body is in fact lying to you.
Yeah.
And when you think you've hit your threshold or you've hit your limit, it's really your body lying to you, and you can ignore it, but I don't know how you could ignore it safely and still push past.
Yeah. No, it's a good comparison though. And you're right, like hunger versus like being able to stand up, two very different messages being sent and two very different reactions. But I speaking only for myself, I would probably be the type, like I train for a marathon, for example, and you're like 26 miles, bullshit. And you're like, oh, I can do 3. Oh, look, now I can do 4. Oh, wow, I just did 6, 8, 10, 12, and before you know it, you're like, yeah, I ain't shit. Because you just continue to push yourself past yesterday's 100 or yesterday's 200. I would probably be the kind to go, oh man, this is it, and go, okay, this must be 50. I'm going to work safely towards 60 because I'm out in the woods. First one to find me might be an animal.
But see, you're giving back because you'd be some animal's dinner, so you're giving back to the world.
That's true, and then it dumps me out somewhere and it feeds the earth. That's beautiful.
Well, because you're all veggie, the animal would be hungry 30 minutes later anyway.
That's true. I wouldn't be much. I have a big frame. It'd take me a while. They could share me. I could be a buffet.
Yeah, buffet.
Yeah.
Well, just remember though, I think it's admirable anybody who trains and runs a marathon, even a half marathon. But I just want to caution our listeners that, well, and even you, Graham, I need not remind that the very first person to run the marathon died after completing it. It was a runner. It was a messenger from a battle, right? And I don't remember if he ran to Marathon or from Marathon to Athens, but it was a 26-mile journey, and it was an urgent message that had to get from the battlefield back to, the capital of the nation state. And he collapsed and died after he finished.
Yeah, that's how the story ends. And they were, physically conditioned in those days. You know why he died? Because he measured it in imperial measurement.
Is that why?
Miles. Yeah, he should have been measuring it in kilometers. Or what's that old timey measurement?
Parsecs or
foot
parcels or
yeah, foot parcel. Yeah, he's measuring it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the quickest way to 26, that's the measurement I would use. Mm-hmm. And not die. So, I might have hit 26 halfway there and still be living.
Yeah. I remember there was a guy in training who was about the same height as me and maybe a little more muscular. And he was really fat, not like Roadrunner fast, but just had this like steady, consistent, faster pace. So he'd start out next to me and he'd always finish several minutes before me. It's like, man, you're really fit. I was trying to figure out like, what's your secret or how do you, he goes, I hate running. I just want to get it over with. I loved how just simple and matter of fact it is.
And that's probably the last thing you would think about that guy is that he actually hates running because he's doing it so well and so effortlessly that you'd think he loves it.
Right. Yeah. It cracked me up. It was pretty funny.
I knew a guy in the Army who said that he could basically run, forever. And of course that's a little bit hyperbolic, and I said, well, what do you mean by run forever? He goes, well, pain doesn't really register. Like the pain when you run when you're running too far or too fast, the out of breath. He goes, that doesn't really register. And I'm like, that could be dangerous because you don't know where the off switch is. And the off switch is actually the big off switch.
The ticker. Yeah.
The ticker. Exactly. So I don't know if that's a good thing, but I did kind of envy him though, because I hate running, and that was never my strongest event.
Yeah, that's usually for me the first. I remember when you're a kid and you don't know how to regulate yourself, you'd always get that stomach cramp or the breathing cramp because you just don't know how to breathe right. But then as an adult, it's usually like what would be the first thing? It's usually my feet, but now it's my hips. You know what I mean? It's like too much pounding on the hips, mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, gotta stop. I'll even go walk the trails, like if my bike's in the shop or it's too wet to ride. After about 4 miles, my hips are like, hey, why don't you get your ass home?
Or how about getting that bike ready? Use the bike instead.
You need to call the bike shop, would you? See when that thing's going to be done. Yeah.
Gosh, old age, isn't it great? Or older age. We're not old, but
yeah,
we're
in a lot of circles we're considered old. In ours, we're not.
Yeah, isn't that how everything's relative, right? I mean, I remember when I was 7 years old, a 14-year-old was like, "Whoa!"
Oh, this is hilarious. I remember turning 22 and being like, "Oh my God, I'm getting so old," like. Just that's maybe a good one for another show is age, the perception of age, the passage of age. Like I remember my mom trying to share with me, like when I turned 25, she'd be like, okay, now that you're 25, and she would kind of list out some of the things I could expect to happen. I thought that was pretty double-edged, because it's like, please don't define 25 for me, but also like I was thankful for like the physical, the things she'd share about like what could I expect from my body physically? I don't know. It sounds weird. I'm not doing it injustice, but it was
a little old for the birds and the bees talk, aren't you?
You're gonna start having feelings when a man loves a woman. No, yeah, just I think she meant it was well-meaning, harmless advice, but it was also just like, all right, whatever.
I remember when I turned 7, and I thought I was a big deal. Like, not like where I was, a brat. I just thought, I'm not 6 anymore. I am 7.
You had arrived. Okay? Yeah.
And wow, I was like, I'm moving up. I'm 7. And I just remember walking around, even telling my Mom, can you believe it? I'm 7. And of course, every parent goes, you're growing too fast, but 7, it was like, but then I go and look at a 14-year-old, and to me, they're practically an adult.
Yeah. They have jobs and families and an apartment.
Well, 2 cars in the garage, exactly. Let alone a 20-year-old or even a 30-year-old. Oh my gosh, what do I say to a 30-year-old?
Yeah, you're from another dimension.
Yeah. So no, I think that is a good topic to explore, along with how the passage of time is slower in the first half of your life and speeds up incrementally each year thereafter, to the point where you're practically going to sleep, on January 1st, and you wake up and it's December 31st already. And you're like, where did that go? Where did that year go?
Yeah. Worth talking through.
All right. Well, anything else we want to cover today?
No, man, that was a good sesh. Yeah. As always, covered a lot. We laughed, we cried.
We kissed 2 hours goodbye.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of.
But no, this is time well spent, right? And again, we've talked in previous episodes about investing time as you would money.
Yeah.
And for me, this is a good investment in time. I hope, for you, our listener, I hope this is a good investment of your time. It doesn't always have to be about something, earth-shattering, right? Sometimes it's just, peeking into the minds of just a couple of ordinary guys
mm-hmm.
who like to, share and talk and explore. So, and as always, like I've mentioned, I love learning new things. So always when talking to you, Graham, I always learn something new, usually about you, because, you're not necessarily what I would call an open book.
Yeah.
But you definitely are a page turner. And so every now and then we get to see a page turn.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff in there.
But as always, appreciate your time, Graham. Appreciate you, our listener, for tuning in. And if you found us not quite so entertaining this week, well, then check us out next week and we'll probably do better.
Yeah, and give us some feedback.
Yeah.
There's days we're going to rock it harder than others, and we definitely don't want to keep, sharing things that no one's really interested in. So it's completely open to feedback.
Agreed. And that goes back to episode 0 where we talked about this being interactive. We want this to be very interactive. So now, we do record these potentially a few weeks in advance. So if you send feedback and we don't acknowledge it right away, don't be disheartened that we're ignoring you. It's only because we do record these ahead of time so that we have time to kind of, clean them up and post-produce and add some, cool music, and we can look professional even though we're not. Or sound professional. Here I am. Look at this podcast.
Give it a look.
Yeah.
What to watch. Turn your AM dial. How did that work out?
So if if you weren't all about it this week, give us a try next week, or even listen to any of our previous episodes. Maybe we've got something in there for you to kind of stimulate you a little bit more, or maybe not. But anyway, we appreciate you at least giving us a try, and hopefully you'll stick around.
Yep, indeed.
All right, buddy. Well, I wish you a good week, and we'll talk again soon. Be safe, be well.
All right, friend. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
If you like what you've heard today, we encourage you to leave us an excellent review wherever you're listening from. Don't forget to tell your friends.